Welcome to the Tarot Coven Cast. Real people, real talk, real magic. Hello there, lovely listeners, and welcome to the Tarot Coven Cast. I'm one of your hosts, Jasmine.
And I'm Elena.
And this time on the show, we're putting our very own Jechanovia in the hot seat. She's going to chat with us all about her other love, homesteading, and her other podcast, the Homestead Atlantica Podcast. So join us as we get to know a different side of our resident Druid. But first, we do have one patron shout out to give. We wanted to say a big thank you to Melissa M. for joining us over on the Patreon. Thank you so much.
We love you.
Yes, big love.
Thank you. Lots of love.
And if you want a shout out on the show, we can give you a personal shout out. You can tell us a podcast you really like. You can tell us your Instagram handle. You can tell us, I don't know, anything you want that we could shout out. But you have to come and join us over at our Patreon, patreon.com/Tarot Coven Cast. Yeah, so we're interviewing one of our own hosts, which I don't know, like
weird, right?
I mean, I guess we shouldn't call it an interview. Like, it's just that you know a lot about this topic. It's a passion of yours, and we wanted to learn more. So why not go straight to the source, right?
Works for me.
I definitely want to know more.
I know. I'm very excited to get into this. But before we dive into homesteading, as we do with all of our guests on the show, we've got some icebreaker questions. But since we've already done the icebreaker questions more or less with each of the hosts, we, decided to kind of switch it up a little bit. So these are just sort of slightly altered icebreaker questions. All right. So tell us about what called you to becoming a Druid.
Okay. This is kind of one of those crazy stories where it's just like over time, I just realized that I was one. Since I was a little kid, like I'm talking like my earliest memories, I would like be talking to trees, and I had this reverence for the earth. Like I always just wanted to be in the forest. Like I vividly remember an experience when I'm guessing around 6 or 7. And I just suddenly, because we lived in an area where we had kind of woods backing our property. And I remember just being out there one day, and I had this awareness of just how different the energy felt in that space. And I only ever got that feeling when I was in the forest, in the woods. And I mean, I still get that to this day. If I walk into woods, even if it's just a little stand of trees, I still get that same awareness of that energy. So yeah, it's interesting how when you're looking back, you realize just how deep it went.
Yeah.
I mean, even during our family reunions and stuff, when I was a kid, where they would hold them, there was like this really old cemetery that like hundreds of years old. And even as a little kid, I would just wander through it. And all my cousins thought it was nuts. I mean, I didn't care, but I did. I just like wandered through as a kid, like in this cemetery all by myself. But, and then like my family's really musical, and my grandfather, his band was like folk music, like traditional old country. And I used to do like the Gay Gordon and square dancing and all those traditional kinds of dancings, and kind of that act of participating in that, it just made me feel really connected to my ancestors. It was a really sacred thing for me. And I mean, when it comes to the ancestors, I've always really had, and everybody already knows it's a big part of my practice, but I've always had this really, I guess, an obsession with history and the ancestors. Like, for instance, when I was a little kid, I volunteered at, the Living History Museums. Like, it's an entire village set up for different periods. Well, I volunteered there as a kid for several years. Right. I was like the only kid who was there by choice. Other kids' parents were just making me do it. And I was there because I wanted to be. And it was really neat because some of the cabins that were there actually had direct connections to my family, to my own actual ancestors. So it was neat to kind of be in the same house, or sitting at the same table, or walking through like the schoolhouse that was on the property. My grandfather actually started school in that old schoolhouse because there wasn't a public school in that area at that time, right? So it was just walking those same footsteps. It just, I don't know. It's hard to really define the feeling that you get, but when you get it, you just know.
Yeah. So what I'm getting is that throughout your life, you've had these different interests and passions, or just like gut reactions towards something. And then as you sort of became an adult and just maybe stumbled kind of across Druidry and was like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm doing this.
Well, yeah, like for the longest time, because as everybody knows, I got my first tarot deck, it was an oracle deck when I was like 17. And
Right.
it was the first time I'd ever been exposed to that world. And so I was just kind of on my own for so long. And then I, over time, kind of met different people, that were just like me, but not quite like me. And so I was just floating around. I was like, I guess I just don't have a title. I just am what I am. And then I started to learn about Druidry in like my mid to late 20s. And I was like, wait, I do that. Oh my God, I do that too. And it was just an awareness that, oh, so that's what I am.
That's beautiful.
I should add one thing, because a lot of Druids, I won't say all Druids, but a lot of them, activism is a really big part of their practice, right?
Ooh.
And so, well, remember when I was talking about the village that I worked at, like the Living History Museum, actually where I became aware of my own white privilege, and kind of it wasn't like it was an introduction, but it was also just another awareness of like the mistreatment and the underrepresentation of the Indigenous peoples in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to mention that really quick because, and the experience is because there was this setup, and he was posing as like a trapper guy, because this is a place where you're dressed in costume and like you're in character, right? And he was this trapper guy, but he was staying in like this teepee, and he had all these Indigenous like crafts and baskets and things. I remember even as a kid thinking, why is a white man teaching me about this? I don't understand.
Right.
And there was no representation of it. So that was kind of what got me on the path of, learning about treaty violations and learning about residential schools and the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. So even just connecting with my own ancestors in that way brought me back to, social change and social justice, which is, like I said, a big part of Druidry as well.
Oh, very cool. Definitely didn't know that. That's really interesting.
But so I mean, anybody who's interested in looking into those Indigenous issues, start with those three things. That's what I would suggest: is treaty violations, the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, and residential schools, because those are usually, I find if you start researching those things, it's going to lead you to all these other like rabbit holes where you can learn more about, the social action that needs to happen. So, and, thanks for letting me, express that acknowledgement. I just felt like it was really important to toss that in there.
Yeah, for sure.
Alrighty. So we all know that your favorite tarot card is the Empress. So what is your least favorite?
Okay. So the most irritating is the Five of Swords, but we've been over this, so I'm not going to do it again. But my least favorite, the most difficult one for me to connect with, is the Hierophant. And I think we probably have mentioned this before. I've always had an issue with it because it's like that hierarchy, the superiority, and I'm not here for it. Then when I realized that it was originally the Pope in like the first tarot, it kind of made it worse because, all those shadowy bullshit reasons.
Yeah.
So I can't respect the card, and I can read it, but I need to if it comes up. I have no respect for it. And I'm like, I do the eye roll when it comes up. So I'm like, fuck you. But So.
Yeah, we definitely have talked about the Hierophant before. I think maybe it was in our numerology episodes. We went a little deep with the Hierophant. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
All right. Well, we already know your fave kind of practices like tarot and gardening and kitchen magic. So what's another hobby that we've never really talked about before?
Well, I am a planner nerd. I think some people probably know that. I just love stationery and all that kind of stuff. And I actually love like decorating and event planning, like doing the fun things like that. Party planning, fundraising, and those kinds of events. I actually was intending to become an interior decorator and designer.
Oh, really? Okay, yeah.
Yes.
Miss Venus in the fourth house. Okay, sure.
Yeah. I don't know what that means, but excellent.
I mean, remember when we were talking about how you've got Venus being your most positive planet down there in the fourth house, and it's sort of manifested in your love for ancestry and genealogy and working, homesteading essentially, but interior designer would also be another thing. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, obviously life changed. I became a mom and stuff, so that took precedence. Looking back though, honestly, I think I dodged a bullet.
Okay.
Ironically, there's not a lot of space for creativity in that field because you're working on other people's what they want to do, and that's just not for me. And then Can you imagine if I was trying to live in a city, like in a condo with muggles and having to work in an office? Like, no, thank you.
Right.
I like
Yeah.
chickens.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Fair enough.
Yeah. I can't picture you in the city life.
Nope.
Like you said, I need to see you out barefoot with chickens,
Yes.
walking around, hugging trees, talking to
I'm here
trees.
for it.
Like, yeah, that's the life. Honestly,
Yeah.
that's I wish.
It is. 10 out of 10 would recommend.
So I feel like we've kind of asked this question before, but it's always nice to ask it again. What does magic mean to you?
Well, it's not changed much. I still like look for that magic in the small, mundane, everyday things. But we had a conversation actually, Jasmine and I, just recently. I think it was a couple weeks ago, and we started to expand on that by looking kind of at how all these little things add up to make one big life, and how you can kind of like follow the thread and realize, like if you follow it back long enough, you realize that one little tiny change just turned out to be like this big life alteration, finding your purpose, divine moment. So I've been really working with that a lot lately, and it's juicy.
I believe what you're talking about is anything could be the next everything.
Yes, that is exactly what it was.
That's cool. I like that. Yeah, that's like, I mean, that is your mundane magic kind of thing, but just looking at it in a different lens, maybe.
Yeah, it's like playing connect the dots with it.
Yeah. Cool.
It's been fun. Yeah.
I like that. It's like when you meet someone and you've met them through someone else, but you had to meet, like, say you had to meet the shitty person, but through that shitty person, you met your soulmate.
Yes. Yeah. All right. Well, next up, what is your favorite book?
A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. Hands down.
Okay.
Yep. 100%.
And just elaborate briefly. How come?
I don't really know. Obviously, I love Yule and Christmas. I love altruism. I love social justice and things like that. I also love how in a time when social status was so important, Charles Dickens, who had actually been so poor, he kind of came up and he was doing well for himself. And he wrote a book that basically slapped his entire social class in the fucking face.
Of course you would love that. Yep.
Makes sense. It was beautiful. And it's just, well, I collect actually different copies of it. My oldest one is circa 1885.
That's really cool.
If I ever get my hands on like one of the original printings though, I will probably have an emotional breakdown. Like,
wow.
Just warning.
Okay. So everyone knows what to look out for Jechanovia for birthday, Christmas.
Bring it. Bring it.
That's really cool. So what is your favorite song right now? The one that you have on repeats, like you listen to it every day, a few times a day.
Montero by Lil Nas X, like full blast. Like my neighbors probably hate me at 7:30 in the morning. I just think it's fun. Like one, because it's fantastic. It makes me shake my ass. It's a great song. Two, because I love and support the empowerment story that came behind it.
Yeah.
And three, because I know it makes some of my unfavorite kind of people cringe. So like you put all the, it's like a hat trick. It's just perfect trifecta.
That's awesome. You never cease to surprise me with your answers to things.
Oh, well, I'm glad.
Yeah.
That's what I'm here for.
I love it. I feel like I'm going to have to listen to it after this.
Please do. You know what? Have you seen the video yet?
No, I haven't.
Please watch the video. Please.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Okay, you have homework.
Yes.
All right, I have homework after this, y'all.
Yes. Okay. You will thank me.
All right. Well, those were our icebreaker questions, as if we actually needed to break the ice with Jechanovia. Yeah. But I figured, it's an interview episode, so we got to always start with our icebreakers. But now we get to dive in to the main event. I'm super excited to learn more. So let's just start with the absolute basics. Like, what is homesteading?
I describe homesteading as the conscious decision to lead a more mindful life. So it's like increasing your awareness and your skill set in an effort to become more involved and kind of responsible in your own subsistence. So taking responsibility over areas where maybe you're relying on grocery stores and, other people and, power companies and things. And of course, it doesn't mean you have to just go off grid and grow 100% of your own everything. It's just taking back little pieces of that power. It can involve learning different traditional skills. So like a connection to your ancestors. Who would have thought? Like skills that people have forgotten though, like growing your own food, preserving it, knowing how to select firewood and season it, knitting and sewing, animal husbandry. So there's that bit of it. And there's like this really deep connection with like the earth and cycles of nature, and almost like realizing and becoming aware of your place in the cycle of life rather than, as at the top of the food chain, because we're actually not, contrary to popular belief. We're in that web of life, right? So yeah, that's the best way I can really describe it.
Yeah. So it just sounds like it's a way of, I think that you said this, but just taking back your own agency, autonomy.
Yeah.
Being self-sustaining in a way. Yeah. Being able to kind of stand on your own 2 feet.
Exactly.
In a number of different ways than you maybe already are. Yeah. Cool. So what led you, how did you find out about this? Why, what attracts you about it? Why, basically?
Well, I mean, I had to think about this. So I'm really glad that I got these questions beforehand.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah. I mean, there's the obvious reasons. So there's like, I want to live more eco-consciously. I want to lower my carbon footprint and kind of be more self-sufficient. So there's that. But really, I also feel like it's really personally empowering when I'm in control of at least like a little bit of my family's food, for instance, or, I'm adding skills to my toolbox, or I'm interacting with my chickens, building shelters and fences, splitting and piling firewood. All of this is a confirmation that my 2 little hands, like they're really capable of a lot more than I ever thought possible. So I look back kind of at my younger years and I'm like, damn, I really wish I would have had, this information then, because things would have been so much easier. It wouldn't have been such a struggle. So, and I mean, I also do love that this lifestyle is kind of it's a testament that the gender norms are bullshit. Man jobs and women jobs and stuff. I know it's been shoved down our throats for generations, but it's just total bullshit because I mean, yeah, I can raise babies. I can bake like the most delicious bread you've ever tasted, but I can also haul like a 50-pound feed sack on my shoulder and I can run a chainsaw and drop a 70-foot tree. So it's like I can do whatever the fuck I want. And it's proved that to me.
That's pretty cool.
That was so badass.
That's definitely an insight that I didn't, again, you never cease to surprise me. Yeah.
Okay. I'll be here all night.
Well, that's good because we need you to stick around for the rest of the episode at least.
So how long have you been homesteading? And I just have like a really quick addition to that. Like, is there anybody in your family now that's doing it with you, or has anyone before you done it?
Well, I mean, my great grandmother, they had a farm and they lived through the Great Depression. Like they did it. They were in it. So I learned a lot from her. I was lucky. She didn't pass until I was 15. So I did learn a little bit from her. And even like right up until I believe the summer or 2 before she passed, she was still doing a victory garden, like every year, like the victory garden, like they promoted in World War II to help with food production and stuff.
Okay.
Everybody would have their own gardens. I never thought, maybe some people don't know what that is, but she still grew one right up until she passed.
Wow.
So yeah, there was that. And I mean, my great uncle, her son, he did like maple syrup every year. And like, I spent a lot of time in the bush, but not really doing the stuff, just kind of being around it. But yeah, like learning and practicing the old ways is like doing the food gardening and the preservation and cooking over fire and making lye soap and things like that. I've been doing since about 2007-ish.
Wow.
But actively working on our home, like, actively having a property and homesteading it and kind of working towards that since about 2015.
Yeah. Wow. Still. So cool. Very cool.
And what are like some of the biggest misconceptions with homesteading?
I guess the first one is that you have to kind of have grown up around it and know what know what to do ahead of time. And it's not true. It helps to learn some things up front. Obviously, I wouldn't suggest just jumping onto a small farm and trying to run it with no experience. So read some books, watch YouTube, but you can do little, you can practice some skills before you even get to that point. But the thing is you're going to continuously learn. It's just like tarot. You never know everything. So if you're interested in it, just start doing it. And then I suppose another one is that like all homesteaders are super conservative and religious. Hi, I'm Jechanovia. Have we met? So I mean, a lot of YouTubers and bloggers and stuff, they're really, really like in your face, outwardly one or both of these things. But that doesn't mean that we all are.
I love that.
Yeah, I feel like that's something that I would have definitely thought before meeting and knowing you better and knowing that you do this, because I think I think that maybe that's just the most common thing that you see from the community, and maybe they're just the most well-known or something, or maybe they're the loudest. I don't know.
I was just going to say they've got the loudest voices. And I mean, a lot of very religious and conservative people are attracted to people like that, and they tend to be a little bit more loud and vocal.
Yeah, gotcha.
So,
yeah.
Yeah. They just get a bigger chunk of the pie, I think, when it comes to the YouTube and Instagram and those things.
So to kind of elaborate on the how long have you been doing this, just before we move on. So you said you kind of got started with it back in 2007, but then in terms of actually having the property and stuff like that since about 2015. So what was like the in between like? I mean, was it just you kind of looking for the property that was going to be the right fit for you and your family? Was it like what was just the kind of the in between there, I guess?
It was all skill building and research. So, I mean, I probably have seen every homesteading video on YouTube. Well, maybe not lately, but up until that point.
Yeah.
I was practicing things. I learned how to cook from scratch. I learned how to bake my own bread. I learned how to preserve and can. I learned how to, dry, use my, dehydrator and things. And I also learned how to cook over a campfire, it's a skill. You got to learn that shit. I can do it now, but at first it sucked. But then, I was researching, how to raise chickens and all this stuff, and making lye soap. That was one of the most, because that was the thing I was most scared of trying, because you hear all these horror stories about lye, right? How it's going to burn you, and it's terrible. And I mean, as long as you're careful and follow the right protocols, it's perfectly safe and fine. But so I think that was my major hurdle. Once I did that, I was like, hey, I overcame that.
You did that. Now you can do anything. Yeah. Yeah, I asked because I think, well, just in general, I think it might be interesting for people to know how long you were building those skills for before you then put it into, buying the home, buying the property, being in your space. Yeah. And then even still from there, I mean, it's been like 6 years since then, but even longer since 2007. So even though you don't have to come from a family that has always done this, like it's not something that you can just pick up, I mean, you can, but like there's a lot of work that. Yeah.
There's a lot of mistakes you have to make ahead of time, and you're better to make them when you're not 100% relying on knowing what the fuck you're doing.
Sure. Yeah. Baby steps, right? I mean, yeah.
And I mean, when we started, we had we had no money. Like we had $0 to invest in anything. So that was a major obstacle too, is we had to get out of debt, and we had to, manage our money and learn to save. And because that's not something we're really taught.
Yeah.
At least our generation. It's not something we were really taught. We had to figure it out for ourselves. So that was a big thing as well.
Yeah.
Is learning how to live cheaply, and, how to make do with what you've got rather than going out and buying everything.
And I mean, this kind of leads off of that, but I'm, talking about learning how to budget, learning all of these different things. But I mean, I kind of think that maybe some people know about homesteading from YouTube videos or from Instagram accounts, and it's probably a little bit polished. And so what's the stuff that, that looks easy that they maybe don't really tell you the actual nitty gritty about? I mean, I don't know if you have like certain points you can just highlight or.
Yeah. I mean, the first one is you got to learn real quick that Mother Nature has the upper hand and always has the last say. Like, you don't get to argue with that. You deal with what you're given, and that's it.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, last year we had
I was just going to say, I feel like you have a story from last year.
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry, I cut you off.
No, that's okay. Well, yeah, no, it was July 10th last year. We had a frost, and I lost most of my garden. So I had very little preserving to do last year. So we ended up buying most of our food at the grocery store. And I didn't like that. It was a bad feeling. And so it really kind of it humbled me. Not that I wasn't being humble to start with, but it was just a really powerful reminder that I'm not really in charge here.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, I bet it was kind of like, frustrating, of course, because you put so much work into it. Yeah, I'm sure you were, but also maybe a good lesson in, or a good like reflection on, hey, I'm doing what I can, this 1 year, it's out of my control. Like a frost happened. Yeah. I didn't, like go blow cold air on all my crops.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, the next thing that I don't think I was quite prepared for was like, if you're going to have livestock, you are always going to be cleaning up poop. It's going to be in your shoes. It's going to be in your hair. It's going to be everywhere. You're going to be shoveling it and everything, but it's worth it. I mean, they're gorgeous little creatures. They bring me so much joy. Like the chickens, we have rabbits and things. We're going to add some ducks and things like that as well this year. But they're worth it. They're so worth it. And they give me fertilizer for my garden. So I think it's a fair trade. I get good tomatoes.
Ooh.
I think that's a really good point to bring up, though, because I'm certain that people will have seen photos of just like cutesy little animals and like how fun it is to cuddle. And then it's like, oh, yeah, did you forget that you have to, clean up their shit?
Yep, you do. Yeah. And you got to have a place to put it.
Yes. Yeah.
My uncle has a bunch of ducks and chickens, and they won't leave his house. Like the house just came with them. And they're cute and cuddly, and we go there to cuddle them, but you're right. She has to deal with all the mess. And they're cute and cuddly. But
I mean, they can't just like, somebody has to kind of take care of them.
Yeah, exactly. Also with animals too, logically you should know this ahead of time, but nobody really talks about it very much. But you're going to be dealing with death. Yeah. It's not easy. And I mean, I still cry if I lose one of my chickens. Like it's not easy to deal with, but it's a part of life. And it really humbles you. A couple of years ago, I had a weasel. It broke in. It kind of got its way into the chicken coop one night. Didn't know what happened. I went out the next morning to let them out, and a bunch of my chickens had passed away. And you could tell that my rooster had died fighting. He was my brave boy. And
wow,
I cried and cried and cried. It was so bad. But it was like, it shattered my heart, but it was like, okay, but I still have these other chickens I have to take care of. And I learned, I'm like, okay, so I need to know, what are the signs of a weasel being around? I needed to know what to look for and to, how to weasel proof my chicken coop. So it was a hard lesson learned, but I had to learn it.
I feel like that's good advice in all areas of life, learning where all the weasels are.
Yeah, because they're everywhere. You got to watch for those weasels.
Right.
Do you think this is something, I feel like Elena kind of led into this a little bit earlier, but is this something that your kids are involved in? Do you think it's something that your kids will, sort of pick up the mantle and continue on?
Well, I mean, when the kids are at home, because two of my kids don't live with us anymore. They've moved on. They're older. But we, of course, always included them. They had their chores. They helped out. They always loved it when we got the new chickens in. And so they would help with all the fun stuff. But, I mean, absolutely one of my kids, I 100% believe that she's going to just build a cabin in our property and make friends with the bears, because she is like my outdoors. I love her. I love all my kids, but she's like an adventurer, right? Yeah. Another of my kids, like she doesn't have a whole lot of interest in the homesteading itself, but through that, she's actually found this really deep love for animals, and she's decided to be a vet tech.
Oh, so, cool.
And I think she's considering being a vet tech for like livestock animals, like chickens and, maybe goats and things like that. So we'll see where she decides to take that. My other two don't seem to have much of an interest in the lifestyle, but they have so much respect for hard work. They have so much respect for the, where our food comes from and how much work goes into it.
Yeah.
They are fiercely independent. They know how to find like joy in the simple little things, and they are not fucking afraid to be powerful women. They speak their minds, and they take no shit.
I wonder who they get it from.
Yeah, I know, right? But I love that, like, maybe they're not going to take up homesteading specifically, but nevertheless, things that you have, that lifestyle has led to a lot of lessons and a lot of, certain things being instilled, for sure.
So with beginners, people who are interested and not sure where to start, what are like 3 good pieces of advice that you have?
Well, number 1 is, yes, you absolutely can do it. I promise. You just need to start. The second piece of advice would be, it's going to be hard. Like sometimes you're just going to want to give up, but it's so worth it if you just stick it out and push through and just figure it out. And the third piece of advice is, don't be distracted with aesthetic. It doesn't have to be pretty as long as it works. That was one of my big obstacles, is because I wanted everything to look nice and look pretty. But I'm to the point now, I'm like, if it works, that's fine. I got 20 other things I got to do. Move on. So
I'm sure once you've been doing this for a long time, that becomes a lot easier as well.
Yeah.
You're probably striving a little more for the perfect look, the perfect this, at the beginning. But once you're I keep trying to do the math. Obviously, everybody knows I can't do the math, but I know it's been like 6 years since you've had your home. And then before that, it was like 8 years. Okay. So like 14 years. Wow. But yeah, I'm sure over that 14-year period, you're just like, listen, I have a life and I have so many things to do.
Yeah.
Let's get moving.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, and I think that's probably another thing that you don't see through like social media accounts and stuff too. You probably see a lot of the complete work, the polished work, or the good times, or
Yeah. Like, I mean, I could show pictures of our like sad looking scarecrows in our garden.
Oh.
They're like 3 years old and they're all tattered and just hanging there like,
but they work.
They're working. That's all that matters.
Right.
I love that.
And I mean, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I just didn't even think about scarecrows. Like, and that's something that I've always wanted. Like, as a kid, I've always wanted a farm, and because I've wanted scarecrows. So I think it's so awesome that you have them.
Yeah. Well, you find out quick that you need them. And like one of them is John for John Barleycorn. And then we have another one I think is Jocelyn. And I can't remember the third one's name.
Ooh, Jaws.
That's awesome.
I love that you named them.
Well, yeah. Well, because I'm always out there, so I talk to them.
Yeah, why not?
I'm like, hey, John, how's it going?
Keep them crows away.
Exactly. But I mean, I was just going to throw in like an extra little bonus piece of advice is learn to bake bread. Like find a bread recipe, try a few different ones, find one you love, and learn to do it so much that you don't even need the recipe anymore. It's so oddly empowering to know how to bake your own bread. I don't know what it is about it. It's such like a fundamental thing is once you can bake bread, you can do anything.
And you mean like in the oven, not with a bread maker?
Yes, from scratch with your arms.
I used to like making the bread used to be my chore, but we had a bread maker. So I actually really enjoyed it because it was very, very simple. You just really throw all of the things in there and you go, boop, and then you can just like, you can do like.
There's no shame in that.
No, I mean, I grew up with that convenience. It was what it was, but I still very much enjoyed baking the bread and having that smell in the house. Like, there's nothing like that. So.
Well, I have a bread recipe and I finally mastered it. I actually found it from Patera over on Appalachian Homestead on YouTube. She's got so much great information. She's amazing. But anyway, she had, and I think she calls it like easiest bread something, whatever. Amazing recipe. It's my go-to. I know it off by heart. It's so simple. It barely takes any work.
Nice.
So I'll share it to you. I'll share it.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll put a link or something. Yeah.
Yes, please.
Speaking of that, just to kind of cut into our questions here, is there like, I don't think we have a question around this, but in terms of community, I mean, obviously people can reach out to you. Maybe we can link this YouTuber that you were just talking about, but are there groups? Are there communities like on social media? Is there anything that you would suggest people look into? I mean, we can add links and stuff, but just for people that are listening right now and want to just like go and do it.
Yeah. I get you. Well, I mean, I do love Roots and Refuge Farm. They also have a thing on YouTube. I'm not on Facebook all the time, really, but they have an excellent Facebook group. When I was on Facebook, that was one of the main places I went. I'm just trying to think of other ones. I don't know that I follow a whole bunch of them right now, but I do follow Farmish Kind of Life on Instagram. She's pretty amazing. She's so real. Her name is Amy, and she's like, she does not sugarcoat. She's like, this is what it is. This is what's happening. This is real life. And I adore her for that. She's amazing.
I feel like that's very important for this kind of thing.
Yes, it is.
Would you, sorry to cut you off. I feel like we can just definitely add some resources to the show notes, or maybe we can put together a resource page or something for people if they're interested. But just, is it mostly women, would you say, in this community, or at least the people that you, or have you just kind of gravitated maybe towards more women in the community?
I do follow quite a few different homesteading ones on YouTube, but it's usually either couples or women, actually. Yeah. I didn't think of that till just now. It might just be because it's the women doing the talking, maybe, in those families. Maybe the men just aren't into it.
Yep.
But yeah.
Like they're still doing it, but they're, background or whatever. Yeah, not background, but they're behind the scenes.
Yes, exactly.
Interesting. It just makes me think of like my ancestors in El Salvador, because growing up, I think that's what they did pretty much. They grew their own stuff that they could, and then they got the eggs from their chickens. If they had chickens, they would eat them. Like, they would raise them to eat soup and stuff, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, this is so cool because my dad was raised to grow his own crops. And that's why he has such a garden. Like
your dad is a garden witch.
Yeah.
He is.
He just doesn't know it.
He doesn't know it, but he is. And I just think it's really cool that I can relate with you on this. I just didn't think about it. I didn't think of it that it had a name, you know, until like you started to really bring it out. And I'm like, that's what that's called.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that could almost go under one of the other misconceptions is that you can't call yourself a homesteader unless you're like, you know, doing everything. And it's like, no, you can be a homesteader if you're in an apartment.
Right.
Like, it's skills.
It's really just
mindset.
about that self-sufficiency.
Yeah. And it's just an awareness and a mindset and a lifestyle choice. You know, shop at your local farmer's market, and if you can't have a garden, buy stuff that's in season. Learn to cook it.
Or I just thought people, like, if you live in a space where you can't grow like a garden, you can always grow your own herbs in pots.
Yep. Yeah.
Use them, dry them, use them for cooking. Because I know someone that does that. They grow their own herbs. So cool.
I think now more than ever, and I'm sure we've said this before, but I think now more than ever, it's pretty important for people to develop these skills where, I mean, I think things are getting better in a lot of parts of the world, but being restricted and cut off from certain things and realizing that at any moment something could change, being able to have that power over your own life is pretty important.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, if you're in this lifestyle, you know, the three most important things is your water, first of all, your food, and your shelter.
Right.
So as long as you have those three things secured, you can figure everything else out.
Yeah.
And I think that this last year has probably shown a lot of people that they probably aren't quite as prepared as they thought they would be.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think they figured it out that they're good and they don't need to overstock on toilet paper.
Yeah.
I think we finally figured that out, right?
I certainly hope so. I could not figure out, okay, so maybe this is just like that part of my brain, but everybody was freaking out about toilet paper. I'm like, have you never heard of a bucket of water and bleach and everybody gets their own face cloth? It's not hard.
Have you ever heard you just jump in the shower after you take a shit and wash your ass?
Yeah.
Like, what do you think a bidet is? This is a thing of water coming up your ass. Like, you just do.
The toilet paper thing was bizarre. I've said this before to a friend, but I really I want to go back and like look at certain transits that were happening because I want to see like what in astrology told us that we were going to need toilet paper. Like, I feel like there was something shady happening that was like, oh my God, we need to be able to wipe our ass. Like, what do we do?
Did you guys? Okay, so there was, when all the toilet paper was running out, there was a video I saw and it was like this dad who was really good at math and he sat down and figured it out. And he did all the math and he said, you know, the toilet paper everybody's buying, if you buy this, you would have to take, it was like 200 poops a day or something like that. And he said, calm the fuck down and stop buying toilet paper. And I was like, that is such a dad thing to do.
And if you are taking 200 poops, you need to go to the doctor. This is not okay.
I'm dead. I'm sorry, but
I'm going to try to find that video just so we can link it because it was.
Yeah, that's really funny.
Anytime I was starting to feel stressed about last year when everything was shutting down, I would just watch that video again and again and just laugh so hard.
I love it. You know, since you are in Canada, so for Canada specifically, is there a particular part of the country that's better suited for homesteading?
Okay, so I've lived in Alberta, I've lived in Saskatchewan, I've lived in Ontario, and I've lived in New Brunswick. So out of those four places, I would say New Brunswick is probably the best suited, just based on my own experience when it comes to like, you know, zoning and what you are and aren't allowed to do, the weather and all that. My guess, though, is that probably the easiest place would be somewhere like in one of the rural, like valley areas of BC, British Columbia.
Yeah.
Just because it's so mild and they get plenty of rain, you don't have to worry about drought and things like that. But I think anywhere could be perfect. You just have to kind of figure out what the nuances are for that specific area.
Yeah, and when I wrote that question, it was like you nailed what I was kind of looking for from an answer for that question in terms of like climate and stuff like that and just like the overall bigger picture. But I think even what you were saying before, you can live in an apartment. Like it really depends on the scale of what you're able to do here. I mean, not everybody is able to dedicate their life to doing all the ins and outs of this, right? So
exactly. And like maybe your long-term goal is to have that homestead, but you're still a homesteader even in your apartment if you're in, you know, downtown Toronto.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
Yeah. But I mean, if you are someone looking for homestead property in Canada, I'll just give you a couple little pieces of advice that I came across. So make sure that you have unrestricted land. So that means you're allowed to do what you want on it, because in some places you're not allowed to be off grid. You're not allowed to have livestock. You're not allowed to even have a garden. You can't even till the soil. So definitely make sure.
Sorry.
No, it's true. That's exactly. I was like, what the fuck are you even talking about? Because there are some places in Canada that if you are not connected to the power grid, they can actually call child services if you have children.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Yep. Which,
so just,
you know, in some ways I'm like, okay, because we want to make sure that, you know, these kids aren't, that no shady shit's going down. But also, I don't know. It's one of those things where the government overreach is like kind of good in some ways, but it's like, it's very pro-con.
Yeah. It's like, dude, I know some people with full hydro and all kinds of money, and they probably shouldn't be caring for children.
100%. Yeah.
Saying.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Not living on grid shouldn't be the reason that you get child services called. Yeah. But I fell down a total rabbit hole with this the other day, and I can't remember what got me onto it, but I realized that there are so many different, it probably was me researching to write these questions for today.
Right.
And then me being like, okay, so where in Canada can you do this? Because there's so many restrictions around certain parts of land and not even being able to till the soil, which is wild.
Yeah. And I mean, if you live where there's an HOA, good luck. Just good luck.
Yeah.
What is it? Homeowners Association. Sorry for anybody who doesn't know what HOA is. Is like they can go right down to what kind of grass you have on your front lawn.
Yep.
So I would highly not recommend that.
Yes. Yeah. This last time that we bought a home, we made sure that it wasn't with an HOA, because the last time we were at an HOA, like I think my dad forgot to like cut the grass he was like a week late, and then like this neighbor came and was like saying some shit, and I'm like, bro, mind your business. Like, are you the HOA police? Like, I'll leave this shit high for another week just to piss you off. Like, mind your business.
See, here's my thought is, are you paying my taxes? Mm-hmm. No?
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Are you paying these bills? Are you raising these kids? Are you paying money into this house? No.
That's pretty much my attitude.
I don't know if you guys know the show You, Me, Her.
No, never heard of it.
It's a Canadian show. Whatever. There's just like a very exaggerated example of like the overstep here. Like this couple painted their door a color that was outside of the regulation colors within the association. How
dare they?
Right? And so the whole neighborhood was like up in arms, and it was obviously an exaggeration a little bit, and like they were mining it for a lot of drama and comedy, but it's kind of like that. Like, it's a little wild. Yeah.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah. So definitely a good thing. You definitely know those restrictions before you wind up buying property or anything.
Do not trust your realtor or even your lawyer to find this out. I will honestly say that, because your realtor is trying to make a commission, and they don't have repercussions if they fuck up.
Right.
Your lawyer may know, may not know. You want to actually go right to the municipality, or I suppose if you're in the States, you want to go to your county, I think it's called down there. But anyway, go right to that office, ask them what the restrictions are for that specific property. And yes, they can tell you. They are legally obligated to tell you, especially if it's up for sale. And have them print it off at their office and keep it on hand so that you have that for backup in the future, just to make sure that you know you're covered. That's what I did here. And so now we can do whatever we want on this property, of course, within reason. We can't build a tower in the backyard.
Sure.
But
say that someone didn't get permission, like to build a garden or start a garden, and they did, how would like the city know or the county know?
It would depend. It could be reported by neighbors. It could be, because they do drive by, like in this area, they do drive by as the building inspectors, just to make sure nobody's doing anything. It's ridiculous. I hate the police state that we live in, but that's a different story in a different episode, I'm sure. But they can fine you big time. They can criminally charge you depending on the environmental laws of the area. If you're too close to your neighbor's property line, your neighbor can sue you. Like, there's all kinds of different things could happen. So definitely cover your ass. CYA, cover your ass. That should always be your motto.
See ya.
Yep. See ya.
All right. This is a question that I have sort of added a little bit last minute, but I thought it would be interesting. What does a day in the life look like for a homesteader? And I mean, it's definitely going to depend. Let's say a day in the life for Jechanovia in homesteading.
Well, lately it'll change through the year, but lately it's been get up, get the kids' lunches ready, get them off to school. I let the chickens out, make sure they got food and water, make sure the rabbits are, food and water, cats and dogs, all that stuff. I'll usually check because I have my clients and stuff. So I just check in really quick, make sure nothing needs to be done. And then it's jumping right into planting. There's been a lot of garden work doing, so tilling and we're putting in hugelkultur beds and raised beds. So there's been some work around that. It's, watering plants. It's fixing things that broke over the winter. We cleared the trail the other day from any trees that came down. So a lot of like chainsaw work, running the wood chipper every day. Oh, right now we're boiling down maple syrup and garden planning, I'm still waiting on some seeds. So there's been some follow up with that. Generally, I usually actually get a couple questions a day from homesteading questions. So I'm answering those.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. And then at the end of the day, it's kind of reversed. You make sure everybody's got food and water for the night. You lock up the chickens and all that. Yeah.
What about at like the height of the season? Would that change? Are you busier, or is, say, spring a busier time? Like when you're opening and closing things, does that tend to be the rush or?
Yeah, the opening in the spring, because you're trying to get all the shit done that you're not going to be able to do in the summertime. So like, for instance, in the summertime, I need to be in the garden weeding and watering, harvesting. And we do our own firewood. We mill our own lumber. We have different projects like that going on. And there's the maintenance of the property, and there's like all those things. And like I said, we're adding some ducks and some turkeys this year to kind of our little homestead here. So we're preparing for that. And then what we do is we have like, it's called a chicken tractor. So it's like this little mobile pen that kind of goes around one of our fields. So every day the birds get fresh grass. So it's like they have their a brand new buffet every morning.
Yeah.
So there's, every morning you're moving that. And, yeah, it's just kind of a million little things, and it's generally something different. And then of course, when canning season comes, that's all I'm doing. I'm harvesting, I'm chopping, I'm cleaning, it's all canning.
So it really is. I mean, it's just such a perfect life for you, because I know that you have such a passion for looking back and seeing what the ancestors did and following, things like Wheel of the Year and the cycles of everything. And it just seems like that it's all about that, because not every day is going to be the same, and every season's going to bring its own specific, I almost said rituals, but I guess it is a ritual. Like there's different rituals every day. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and even I'm sure everybody noticed through the Wheel of the Year, that's what we're celebrating. We're celebrating these different landmarks in the agricultural year. That's what it was built around.
And, that's something that honestly has just really clicked for me. Like, I think it's always been there, but then hearing you speak about it, it's like, because at first I was like, man, these people just party a lot. Like they just have fires and they party, and that's all they ever do. But like, no, that's not all they ever do. They work really fucking hard for like a month and a half, and then they party and they celebrate all that hard work.
Well, because that's what those celebrations are. Like, for instance, like Imbolc, like in Europe, obviously not here, but in Europe, Imbolc, like just before that time or around that time, that's when they were seeding their fields with whatever, like rye or whatever they were growing, right? So once that work was done, everybody would get together for a party. Yeah. Because a lot of times, like especially like in the ancient times, they lived together, they farmed as a community. It wasn't individual farms. It was everybody kind of pitched in communally. And then they'd throw this big ass party. And it's the same, like at Samhain. That's when they were harvesting all their animals for the winter, because they didn't have enough food to feed all of them through the winter. So they would just keep the ones they needed to, keep them going the following year. And they would have this huge giant feast, because there's some parts of the animals that they don't store. So they would, and that's, I think, where a lot of the sacrifice mythology came from. It's like kind of a sacrifice, but no more than anybody else who's sacrificing food to eat, like whether it's plants or whatever.
Yep. Well, so, I mean, that's how it connects with the Wheel of the Year and I would say, the Druidry and everything. I always say that, I always feel like I'm really mangling that word, Druidry. Like it's a lot of but is there any way that like, do homesteading and tarot mix? Is there a way that you use those things together, or have you kind of, over the years learned how to work with them together, or yeah, do they go together at all?
Kind of, because I use tarot as a daily package, daily practice. Yeah, we'll try practice. A lot of times, like if say I'm having an issue or I'm frustrated with something, the tarot, when I'm doing my pull, it's going to give me guidance about that. So, that's always something. Like, for instance, like last year when we got the frost,
Yeah.
I was really upset. So I pulled some cards, and basically it was just like, you just got to accept it.
Yeah.
I think I got the Wheel and the 9 of Swords, I think.
Oh, wow.
Or something like that. It was just like, deal with it. Like,
yeah,
buck up, pull up your big girl pants. Time to move on. So in that sense, yes, I do use them all the time for that. I did use it when we were looking for a place, like when we were trying to decide where we wanted to move. I did help them to choose kind of where I was looking. So that did help. I used them as part of a money attracting spell that I did when we found this house. And so when we were applying for our mortgage and stuff, and
right.
And like we were working through the negotiations. And so without giving too many details, what happened was we negotiated nearly $20,000 below asking price.
Holy moly.
And we had a brand new septic system put in before we closed as part of the conditions. And the funny thing was, and obviously I can't tell you why, but this actually worked out as a mutual benefit between us and the seller because of their circumstances at that time. It actually helped them out. So it wasn't even like we had to be sneaky. It just worked.
Wow, that's really cool.
Yeah.
I love it. It was meant to be.
Yeah.
It aligned in a perfect way for you.
Well, and it was funny because we were driving by this house. We didn't even notice it. It literally was just like a minute and a half up the road from where we were already living, in a house that was too small. We needed to move. We knew we needed to move. But we were making the best with what we had. And we were driving by. We saw it had a for sale sign. We're like, interesting. So we called the realtor, looked at it, and we were waiting for the realtor to show up to show us the house. And we were like, okay, looking around the yard. And this partridge was like just sitting there looking at me. And if you know what a partridge is, like you don't get close to them. They fuck right off. Mm-hmm. And it was there. I must have been within 2 feet of it. And it was just staring at me. And I was like, oh. And then I found out that was transition. That was like finding your home. That was, your home calling to you kind of messages.
Oh,
partridge. So so we put in an offer that night. The offer was accepted that night. And then we moved in the next month.
That's so cool.
Meant to be, for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, and as a little added bonus, the day that we actually looked at the place was Beltane.
Beautiful. Oh my gosh. So like it's all coming, that's coming up. So it's going to be anniversary time soon.
Yes. Yes.
I would have guessed that you had obviously found ways to make homesteading and tarot work together just because they're both part of your lifestyle. But I mean, I guess it is going to differ from person to person, but
yeah,
at the very least, I guess if you're living the homesteading lifestyle, or if you're, aspiring to do that kind of thing, and you want to follow the Wheel of the Year, that's like a really great way to integrate all of those different practices together.
Oh yeah. And I mean, just if you want to integrate your spiritual practice and homesteading, observation is like, just look at what nature is doing around you. Like that is the most powerful thing you can do, and just learn to work with that rather than working against it, rather than trying to make it work for you and just going with it. That's a really powerful spiritual practice in itself.
All right. Well, I mean, we do have a couple of more questions, but they're just more related to the podcast. So for listeners that don't know, Jechanovia does have another podcast. She steps out on us every so often to do the Homestead Atlantica podcast. I think you've put out three episodes.
Yes. I'm trying to do the math here, and it's hard. I think there's probably going to be another episode already up though by the time this one airs.
All right. So 3 or 4 episodes have come out. Yeah. Awesome. So tell us about the show.
Well, it's just basically me rambling and kind of geeking out over homesteading stuff, like just like we've been chatting here. My goal is just to keep it really simple though, like casual, offer tips and kind of low or no cost ideas for anybody on the path, whether you're in an apartment or on an acreage. I think it's important because so many of the podcasts and YouTube accounts out there, like they started off with this large, or at least a decent sum of money, and kind of they built from there, or they had like extra help or got funding or had big equipment. I mean, not saying that's a bad thing, but it's not really helpful for people like me who literally had $0 to invest at first. And we were in an apartment. We were struggling to make ends meet. it took us 14 years to get here.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to kind of share that encouragement, because when I was just starting out, I was like, I'm never going to get to this point. This is just, it's stupid. Like, I don't even know why I'm trying, but we did it anyway. So, but yeah, it's been a long, slow road. I've learned a lot of stuff on the way, and I just want to inspire other people who are on that same journey, just so they know I see them. And if I can do it, you can do it.
How do you manage that where you know that there's going to be so many different, so many different people, from doing it in an apartment to having the big piece of land and being able to do it on a larger scale? Like, how do you navigate being able to talk to that kind of wide crowd?
Well, I'm kind of tuning into where I was at that point. So even information when I was in the apartment, for instance, even though I didn't have chickens, I was still watching and trying to get information about having chickens and how to take care of them and different problems with them. Just so that I knew when the time came, I kind of have a good idea of what I was doing. But I'm also kind of adding in little things like, or I don't know if I already have or not at this point, but it's like how to, start seeds. So that you don't have to be, have a garden to start seeds. You can start seeds on your kitchen counter. And that could be, maybe you're just sprouting seeds to eat them as sprouts instead of, and it's basically like the concepts can be applied almost anywhere. I'm trying to think of another example, like canning, for instance. You don't have a garden? That's fine. Go to the grocery store, find whatever's, there's always those produce discount racks, right?
Yeah.
Find one of those, get a bunch of, apples, and learn to make applesauce and learn how to can it and, label it. And there's all these little things you can do that they just all add up. And then when the time comes, it's one less thing you have to learn later when you have a whole place to run and you don't have time to be learning new things.
Yeah, totally.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. Such a smart idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, that's the kind of stuff I did.
That's brilliant, because you can have all the stuff, but not the space. So you like learn in the meantime while you work on getting the space. So
yeah, exactly. And the thing is if you figure out early on that, hey, I'm not really enjoying this all that much, it's a whole lot easier to stop it when you haven't invested in a house and property, livestock, like,
Yeah.
So there's that aspect too.
So what sparked your idea to do a podcast for homesteading?
Like partially what I was just saying, like it can feel really inaccessible to a lot of people, especially when they're seeing all those videos and photos of, the cleaned up end product of years and years and years of work, or financial investment. And also because I'm always being asked questions on how to do things or how to grow things or how to make certain things or what's your recipe for this, which I love. I mean, I love that. So I keep the questions coming if you happen to be one of those people. But especially over this last year, I think a lot of folks really are realizing just how reliant, I know we were talking about this, but they're so reliant on this system. And, the supply and demand that the system they have in the stores, it doesn't really work for what we were facing because they don't keep enough stock to actually be able to feed people. So when we already have an awareness, and maybe that's part of this homesteading thing too, and I know I've mentioned it before, is just to have your pantry stock. Just have a stock pantry so that if something happens, you don't have to run to the store and get whatever you can find. You've already got it.
I think that was in your first episode you were talking about, or maybe the second episode, one of the earlier ones anyway. But
one of them.
You were talking about, just how to keep the pantry stocked and kind of like the organization of it and everything too. And it's something I never even thought about. Like I just bring my groceries home and there's a method to the madness, but it just kind of goes in there. But that was a really fascinating thing. And it's so interesting to hear your take on, mundane magic, obviously, but the things that we do all the time that if we thought about it from the lens that you're bringing, like it just really, simplifies things or just makes that aspect of life a little bit easier, but also that feels, it goes back to that whole empowering thing. Yeah, you just feel more in control over that certain thing. And it's just your pantry, but it is nice.
But it's also your life force.
It's your food. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And when it comes to like snowstorms or, even at the beginning or end of March, whenever it was last year, when shit kind of hit the fan, everybody was panicking. And even my family in Ontario, they were texting like, are you guys okay? Do you have enough stores? And it's like, yes. Yeah. I have 3 months worth of food stored. I'm fine.
You were the ones that were ready.
Well, that's the thing. And so it's like that sense of insurance, and you don't have to stress about things. You don't feel that same level of stress. Yeah. So it's
think
It's
that's
really
what I was trying to
empowering.
say too, is that makes your day-to-day life a little, I mean,
Yes.
less stressful, but yeah.
Just knowing that you've got that backup.
I know. And I remember as a child, like my grandmother would buy a lot of things in bulk like that. And I mean, she had space. She had a basement. She had an extra freezer. She was able to kind of hang on to larger quantities of things like this. I remember like kind of laughing about it and being like, grandparents, you know, like they're kooky. And now I'm like, yeah, no, that was super smart. Like she was definitely prepared.
Yeah. Well, and I find too with that generation, if they lived either through the Second World War or just the little while after, while food was still rationed, they learned real quick to just store everything you possibly can.
Yeah.
Because you don't know if you're going to be able to get it next week. And I find a lot of them carried that like right through.
Yeah.
So you've got an episode you said that's going to be releasing soon after this recording. Can you give us a little teaser on it?
I'm going to chat just a little bit about like the structures and things that you want to kind of have set up on your homestead for different things. Now, I don't just mean like, you know, a greenhouse and a shed and things, but I mean, you know, the chicken tractor or garden trellises, fencing, things like that too, just to kind of get your brain going of what you might need to be thinking about ahead of time, what might help you, what might, you know, not be something you need right away. A couple of skills probably I'm going to add in just to try out if, you know, if you're just beginning, like living in an apartment or a town. I know I gave a couple of examples now, so I don't need to go over it again, but little tips like that. Probably talk a little bit about making biscuits and bread. And just things that you can do to practice homesteading if you're still kind of waiting. Jess from Roots and Refuge Farm, she says, turn your waiting room into a classroom. And I was like,
oh, that's awesome.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
She's brilliant. Cool. Yeah. And I think eventually I'm probably going to, in another episode, I'm probably going to talk about actual other things you could do, like backwoods camping and co-ops and things like that you can practice homesteading and bushcraft skills and those kinds of things, because that's everybody knows I do.
Okay, interesting. So that would be, I mean, backwoods camping is just when you don't have your car, like you have to travel to get there. You leave your car somewhere. You got to take like a boat to get to wherever you're going.
There's no running water, no
running water. Yeah.
Power.
So a good friend of mine loves to do this kind of camping and has been trying to convince us to do it. I mean, Tyler is so ready to leave the world behind and go backwoods camping, but I'm like, no, I want the car there. Like I don't know. It's definitely not, I don't know. I'm not ready for it basically.
It's not for everybody.
I never connected that with the idea of that being a good stepping stone or like a good trial run sort of. But yeah, I could totally see this friend that really likes doing it. She's very prepared in that way. And I don't know if she'd want to do it full time, but
it's just
very interesting. Yeah.
And the cool thing is like, you know, all the preppers are talking about, you know, shit hitting the fan and stuff, which that's cool. Mm-hmm. But, you know, in the event that does happen, she'll be a hell of a lot more prepared than a lot of people will, right? Because she's practiced. She knows what she's doing.
Oh yeah. And she's one tough babe. So I know who I'm calling on.
There you go. See?
Yeah.
You got connections.
Yeah. Yeah. She loves to swing a hatchet around and, you know, cut some wood for the fire.
Exactly. Well, see, that's why these things are good practice, because those are the tools you need to know how to use.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
Yeah.
Apocalypse planning. This whole time I'm thinking this is apocalypse planning.
Some of it. Well, and see, that's the thing. And I know
or it just kind of doubles as that almost, but
yeah. Well, you see kind of the mainstream media of like the hoarders and the hardcore preppers that are like zombie apocalypse is coming. But homesteading is actually kind of prepping, but it's not prepping for that kind of stuff. It's prepping for storms. It's prepping for pandemics. It's prepping for all these little things that we just don't necessarily have a warning about. So, and of course, when I get my chicks and I get my ducklings and I get my turkey poults, you can guarantee one of my episodes is going to have those, and you're going to definitely hear them in the background just because. So
that's cute.
I'll make sure I record it with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I was going to ask if you have any other topic ideas in mind for future episodes, but you obviously don't have to divulge, but.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, and I'm also going to do in June, so it's a long ways off, but when the lilacs are blooming, we're going to make lilac jelly. And I'm going to do on that.
So fancy.
Yeah. It'll be good times.
Nice. So in terms of like more like overall topics, what do you think? Yeah. What's your goal in, I don't know, say like your next 6 months of podcasting? Like, what are the big topics that you want to hit?
I think mainly I just want to do like preservation, like preserving your food, knowing what to store and how to store it. And if you can't preserve your own food, then kind of like things to look for in the store and grab when they're on sale, and kind of things that'll last longer in the pantry, and just that kind of, because those are usually the most often those are the questions I get.
Okay. Yeah.
So, but
and so
that could change.
So where are you getting the questions? Is it on your Homestead Instagram?
Homestead Instagram. Some of them are just people that I know in my everyday life.
Sure. That
just kind of shoot me a text here and there. And then I also get some on my Jechanovia, which is super cool. Yeah. But I was like, all right, cool. You found me over here. Nice.
Well, I was going to say, like, obviously we're going to link to your other podcast, but should we link to that Instagram as well? And like, are your direct messages open to people? Are you comfortable taking in questions?
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah.
Cool.
That's what I'm here for, because, it's what I do. I like it.
Nice. So I would also say that part of which is kind of part of the goal here at Tarot Coven as well, but to build community, really.
Yeah, especially for the people who maybe aren't feeling, and this is going to sound like a strong word, but aren't feeling like they belong in the homesteading community. Mm-hmm. I want them to feel okay, even if they don't want to call themselves homesteaders yet, even if they're just thinking about it or exploring it, you're still welcome. Like, you can still ask questions. You don't have to go out and do what I advise or do the way I do it.
Sure.
Just, know that you're not on your own and there's somebody looking out for you.
That's nice. Yeah. Well, this has been so much fun getting to know this side of you and learning more. Yeah. And I mean, it's not anything that's ever been on my radar before I met you. So I probably I probably would have found the podcast to begin with, but I really enjoy your show. I find it very interesting, just the way you talk about what you're doing and the topics. Like, I don't know how much of it I can, some of it I can use for sure. But I mean, I just enjoy listening. You can tell that you have a passion for it. You can tell that you are, you definitely have the experience. You know what you're talking about. And it really comes across that it's a love of yours. So
it is definitely a love. I don't know everything.
If you're just looking for something to listen to sometimes, highly recommend.
Yeah, you can listen to me to nerd out over, what was the last one? Seeds, I think.
Yeah.
You can just listen to me nerd out. You can hear my seeds in the background falling all over the place and shaking.
Yeah, the little packets. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's just kind of fun to learn some of that stuff, whether or not you put it to use. Like, it's, back pocket.
Well, exactly. And here's the thing too, even if you just listen to kind of stuff like that, it doesn't have to be me, just anybody. But if you're listening to that stuff, it'll still be in the back of your mind. So God forbid anything happen and we have another pandemic, whatever, and you need to know these skills, at least you're like, hey, I remember hearing something about this once. So either, you can start trying it yourself or you can go back and find the resource, but it's just there. It's in your awareness. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Jechanovia.
It was my pleasure.
So much fun.
So lovely to have you on the show. We'll have to have you back. You were a great guest. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Tarot Coven Cast. Stay tuned for our next episode when we'll be talking all about court cards and personalities. And until then, everyone, keep making magic.